Hello, I'm Rosemarie Alley, and this is my co-author, Bill Alley. I'd like to thank Boulder Bookstore for hosting us. Our book, The Water Recycling Revolution, Tapping into the Future, is our fourth book on environmental science issues for the general public. We write as a scientist and non-scientist team. Bill provides the science, and my job is to make it understandable and interesting. We received some questions from Boulder Bookstore, so I'll take the first one. What inspired you to write this book? We were gearing up to do a book about PFAS. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, PFAS is a complex set of chemicals that are showing up everywhere in the environment. And they're so slow to break down, they're known as forever chemicals. So I was sitting outside reading a PFAS report that Bill had given me, and it was pretty dry going, so I was trying to stay awake. While looking over the references, an article about water recycling caught my eye. I clicked on it and started reading, and suddenly I was wide awake. So I showed Bill the article and told him, water recycling looks like a really interesting topic. And that was it. We never looked back. Water recycling is an issue of growing importance in the face of climate change and population growth. For example, the Colorado River, which supplies drinking water to over 40 million people, has recently been named the most endangered river in the country. Over the past 2 decades, California is being hit with one drought after another, with very little break between them. This year, for the first time ever, Arizona is dealing with a significant cut to their Colorado River water deliveries. But the problems aren't just in the West. Across the country, utilities are turning to water recycling, including such water-rich places as Atlanta, Georgia, and Florida. But there are some big challenges, and the first one is to sell the public on the idea. There's a knee-jerk reaction against water recycling that's become known as the yuck factor. And there's a long-established precedent for this. From the time of earliest human settlements, there's been a taboo against mixing sewage and drinking water. Now, suddenly over the past few decades, recycling municipal wastewater for drinking water has gone from an option of last resort to an increasingly common practice. We tell this story in our book. So now I'm turning it over to Bill.
Okay, thanks, Rosemarie. So I'm going to take a series of questions that we've gotten from the Boulder Bookstore and try to answer them. So the first question is, can you tell us about potable reuse water? Well, potable reuse takes water that's been through a conventional treatment process and takes it through additional steps. For example, reverse osmosis is one that's known to a lot of people. There are other approaches, for example, microfiltration, which where the water is passed through fibers. These have tiny holes, 1/300th the diameter of a human hair. And so it removes anything larger. And there are other options. The advanced treated water is then usually discharged to a lake, groundwater, or other environmental buffer. After mixing with the natural water, withdrawals are treated to meet drinking water standards. A recent variation is direct potable reuse, where recycled water is connected directly to the drinking water system. Only one city in the US currently uses this approach, Big Spring, Texas, which long ago lost its Big Spring, but there's considerable interest in development by others. In fact, the International Space Station also does direct potable reuse with the astronauts' urine. As the astronauts quip, yesterday's coffee is tomorrow's coffee. Okay, the next question that came up is, how can using recycled water help us beat climate change? Well, potable reuse is an obvious way to adapt to climate change by making maximum use of our water resources. In particular, the availability of recycled water is drought resistant, as wastewater is less vulnerable to the swings of wet and dry periods. As the mayor of one city using recycled water put it, with potable reuse, it's like it rains every day. Of course, there are complications in places where downstream users or the environment are dependent on that water. Okay, so for a third question, what kinds of research did you do to write this book? As a hydrogeologist, I was familiar with some potable reuse projects. To get a comprehensive understanding, we reviewed hundreds of articles and, more importantly, interviewed 40 to 50 people directly involved in water recycling. Many had good stories to tell about how people came to accept or not accept potable reuse, including interesting tidbits such as how the toilet to tap moniker came about, and how purple pipes came to signify non-potable reuse. Question number 4, how do you get people to get beyond the yuck factor when it comes to drinking recycled water? Well, that's a big challenge, and we talk a lot about that in the book. There are 2 particularly effective ways. One is through demonstration facilities that allow people to take a tour and see how the purification process works, and then taste the water at the end. Seeing is believing, as we discovered after our tour of the San Diego demonstration facility. And I think Rosemarie will agree with me on that.
Oh, yeah.
Likewise, beer brewing contests with recycled water have proven to be quite popular. As one person in our book observes, hand people an ice cold, crystal clear cup of recycled water, and you're likely to get some upturned noses. But hand them a cloudy, pale yellow beer made from the stuff, and suddenly everyone's a recycled water connoisseur. Okay, as a final question, is there anything else you want us to know about your book? Well, a little bit about how the book is structured. We tell stories about water recycling from across the country while weaving in discussion of the technical and public acceptance challenges along the way. This topic is also largely uncharted territory. Ours is the only general interest book addressing all aspects of water recycling. So with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Rosemarie, who will read a short passage from the book.
Oh, okay. So this is from our chapter on achieving acceptable risk. In May 1998, the City Council of El Cajon, one of 19 sister cities in the San Diego metropolitan area, addressed the topic of recycling wastewater into the drinking water supply. A retired plumber stood before the City Council and spoke into the microphone. I spent most of my life trying to separate sewage from water, and this is just plain against common sense. In a large electrical blackout, the electromechanical system could shut down and let raw, unfiltered sewage into the drinking water supply. The meeting ended by the council asking for more information about the city's recycling plans. The following day, in a letter to the editor of the local newspaper, a woman explained that her husband had attended the city council meeting because they were addressing traffic concerns. The issue of recycling sewer water had come up, and the council said they needed more information. She wrote, "Why do we need more information? They're suggesting that we bathe and drink water that was previously flushed down the toilets of strangers. What more do we need to know? What makes you think that we know everything there is to know about cleaning sewer water and making it fit for human consumption? I know that most council members are parents and or grandparents. Imagine bathing a newborn baby in water that has been recycled from wastewater. The idea is unthinkable. Water should be judged not by its history, but by its quality. This statement by Dr. Lucas van Buren, an early pioneer of water recycling in South Africa, is perhaps the most popular quote cited by professionals engaged in the world of potable reuse. Yet many people have difficulty ignoring recycled wastewater's past. As a result of our deep-seated aversion to human feces, potable reuse is a bonanza for psychologists, sociologists, and communication specialists who study perceptions of risk and how to improve public acceptance of recycled water. Among the phenomena of interest is the magical law of contagion. Simply put, once in contact, always in contact. In other words, anything that touches something disgusting becomes disgusting. While such magical properties have been ascribed to primitive people, they reflect a fundamental aspect of human reasoning. University of Pennsylvania psychologist Paul Rosen spent decades studying people's irrational feelings of disgust. In one experiment, Rosen asked his subjects if they would put on a sweater that Hitler had worn. Almost everybody says no, said Rosen. Then he asked, what if it was dyed to look completely different? Or say the yarn was unraveled and made into a new one, would they put it on? Most people said no. There was one exception, however. If Mother Teresa put the sweater on first, some of Rosen's study subjects would consider putting it on too. In some way, her goodness would cancel out Hitler's evil. Ironically, anyone drinking a glass of water in Europe is likely ingesting at least a few water molecules that at some point passed through Adolf Hitler's body. A truly disgusting thought. Some water reuse specialists have suggested that when toilet to tap comes up, just explain that it's really more like toilet, treatment, 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 aquifer reservoir, treatment, treatment, tap.
Okay, thank you, Rosemarie.
And thank you, Boulder Bookstore.